Sup, y'all? It's your boy Karas, and today I'm bringing you the definitive guide for Fury Warrior for solo shuffle in patch 11.07. Now is the time to play Fury. We are doing tremendous amounts of damage. We have great cleave potential as Fury, great single target as Fury. We can play either Mountain Thane and or Slayer and still hit 2400 really easily. The difference between Slayer and Mountain Thane is one has more sustained damage, while the other one has more burst potential with Blade Storm and your executes. And both are pretty strong on the execute side, but Slayer is stronger. The Blade Storm for Slayer is stronger, especially with the mastery. The haste kind of matters, but it kind of doesn't. I find that running the haste Slayer build doesn't really do a whole lot, but with the situation with mastery stacking and not even running the tier set at all, you're actually doing huge amounts of disgusting damage. So let's get right into it. I have a few different builds here. This is my main build. This is my main single target build. This is the build that I do huge amounts of damage on. Everything is a modifier or extending something else to get something else back. So, Shockwave, great into Hunters, Demo Locks, Unholy Death Knights, hell, even Mistweaver Monk, or not Mistweaver Monks, Windwalker Monks, because you can stun all their all their Stormwraths and Fires or Seths. Stun Pets, you can basically always have a stun on the healer and a stun on the DPS. Pretty much always at the same time. So you can pretty much CC an entire team by yourself, and you can follow up with a fear on the healer into like a leap fear back into the enemy team, right? So that's a really good thing to do as well. Stat wise, I'll just show you my gear. Just to get this out of the way, I'm running full mastery and versatility on the gems. Everything has mastery on it. If it doesn't have mastery on it, I'm not running it. Everything has mastery. Not one piece of my gear has any haste on it, except for this sword. Or maybe not this sword, the trinket. So you're already going to get a ton of haste from your trees. I think the trinket only gives you, so there's two. There's two more. So a total of 4, plus the trinket, that's 6% base haste. Outside of PvP combat, in PvP combat, still 6%, but still enough. Because you're going to get 8 from Frenzy, so that's 14 plus the 15. So you get about 30% haste. We're a little over, which is always really nice. And another thing is, in this PvP thing, so with the mastery, there's kind of one enchant you're going to run. There's technically 2 if you're going to run mastery and versatility all the way. And there's only 2 that I've found that actually do much of anything. People can disagree with me on this, but there's the one that's going to give you haste, which actually makes your attack speed fucking crazy, and actually gives you a bunch of rage and gives your burst back quicker, which is the haste on your weapons. So running that double times 2. And that actually procs quite a bit for Fury, because you get so much haste from your tree and just being in rage, which is actually another thing where you can just run that instead of just getting the strength proc. But the thing is I'm running, instead of going into Dragon Roar with this build, I'm fully committing to utility on my tree here with Rumbling Earth to get that shockwave back quicker, and also extending its range so it just fucking hits everything. And it's actually pretty, you can actually catch a lot of people off guard with Rumbling Earth, which is actually kind of funny. And you gain 10% of your strength to 10% of your armor. So that's another really, really good thing. Warriors have a ton of armor, right? So we get a ton of strength. And since we're already getting that anyway, we are already getting a ton of strength from Authority of Radiant Power. I think it's something like, what, 5,000? 5,000 strength, plus it does a little bit of damage with that enchant. I like the haste and the strength. And then if you're going to be running a mix of haste and mastery with versatility, hit about that 20% mark ish. And I think with the Mountain Thane build, you're gonna want to run the two set. So like legs. I think I actually have them in my bags here. You're gonna run legs and head, I believe, because they both have mastery and burst or haste on them. That's kind of what I find works with Mountain Thane. So we've got this build, biggest single target damage build that we can possibly get. We're always going to be doing damage with this build. You can go into bleeds. Oh, wrong tree. Hold on. No, I forgot to delete that one. But here's the Mountain Thane one that I found does a lot of damage as well. Now, there are a few things you can do with this. You can drop this. Now, I don't really like that. I would run something like this because you're already going to have a ton of damage and you're already going to get sudden death proc, so having the Massacre. This is more like the heavy sustain build with Slayer. Because you're always going to be getting Reap the Storm, which is always going to buff your damage, right? This thing actually does hit pretty hard. I believe it can do about 8% of your damage, depending if it crits or not, and vice versa, whatever. But it actually does a really decent amount of your damage. I like to remember Barbaric Training, just increases the whirlwind damage, and you're already getting the buff from Meat Cleaver. It just adds a lot more sustained damage throughout your entire rotation. And actually, you generate a lot more rage because you're actually hitting other targets as well, right? So that's always really nice. And I still run this with the full mastery build. So, and then I've got kind of my fun build, Battleground Blitz sort of stuff, but I've actually run this in solo shuffle as well. And it's actually kind of memey, but if you're fighting a comp, you feel like you can kill in the opener, you can open, and immediately, so the way I like to open is get my 5 stacks of my Slaughterhouse, and then I burst, right? Refresh Odin's Fury. Odin's Fury did my top dam. Thunderous Words, all that stuff. So, and that's another thing to think about as well. Your Blood Craze, it's always going to give you Cold Blood Hot Steel. When you don't have anything else to press and you don't have your Execute to do damage on a sudden death proc with Slaying Strikes, and you have a Execute proc, you can choose to use it, but you're not going to lower the cooldown on Blade Storm. And you kind of want Blade Storm and Dragon Roar to kind of go together, because then you're going to Odin's Fury and then Blade Storm. Especially if you're right on top of the target. And you can run Battlefield Commander for a little bit more damage. And there's a little thing, actually I'll get into that in a second. So this is kind of the Slayer Bleeds build that I like to run. A lot of other warriors like to go into other talents and kind of drop this and then do something like this. I'd like the bleed damage having a lot more effect, especially if you're able to cleave, because Dragon Roar actually does a lot of your damage, and so does Cold Blood Hot Steel, or Cold Steel Hot Blood, when you're actually cleaving and you're actually getting those crits off. With Blood Craze, you're actually able to do a ton of damage and actually have a ton of pressure throughout the game, where eventually just once you start hitting that minute 30 mark, people can't stay alive. It's basically like a game of hotcakes. Or hotcakes, you know, whoever can get one first come, first serve on the kill, right? Mountain Thane. Mountain Thane is actually pretty interesting right now, because they buffed the talent for Rampage. So Bloodthirst and Rampage damage is increased by 30%, but in PvP combat, it's increased by 45%. And this is where I'm going into the mix of Mastery and Haste, and you're going to run Shadow of the Depths or Radiant Power. And basically where this is going to have an effect, where you run the split in between your Mastery and your Haste, you could probably get around 15-20% Haste, all the rest Mastery, and have about 40-something% Mastery, and 15 to 20% Haste, I would say, is good. Even closer down to maybe even 12.5. You still get the benefit of this talent, where it's going to make your Rampage fucking crazy. You can run the Mastery build, but I find it's a lot slower and even though you do have a ton of burst damage with it, Mountain Thane kind of lacks kill potential. Is where Slayer doesn't, because your Blade Storms with Slayer just, they're hitting that hard. Still, they're still doing a ton of your damage, and if you're stacking full mastery, the Blade Storms are actually huge, and having the 2 Bloodthirsts that go in that as well are huge, and your Executes are fucking, they just kill people, right? I've had full cooldowns, 3 stacks of Slaying Strikes with the everything, just the stars aligning. I've got 5 stacks of Ashen Juggernaut. It's gonna crit. Someone's gonna get chunked for half their health bar and they're gonna die, right? Especially into like a Clothy or something. And then I have kind of the meme, the meme Fury Warrior build, kind of the meme Mountain Thane build. So it's kind of no execute damage, really. There is execute damage, but not as much as you would think. Now, instead of doing big damage with your Slaying Strikes or big damage with your Mountain Thane and all that, this is kind of like just a huge bleed spec. And you don't really need the potential of execute, I feel like, with this build. Right? I have really low haste on this warrior, but you're just able to hit everything. And if you get a proc off of your this talent here, Burst of Power, you can actually kill someone. And the more you cleave, got triple stacks there, you're just able to do a ton of pressure. A lot more kill potential with this spec when you're able to run like this and you're able to hit something really squishy. You still have a ton of sustained damage. You don't really need the onslaught because you're already going to be pressing Raging Blow to get as much slaughtering stacks as you can. So like I have a Burst of Power right there, and Bloodthirst, I've had Bloodthirst be able to hit for 1.8 million in PvP arena. It does a lot of your damage still. You still have the full benefit of all the haste and everything else. So those are the builds. I'm going to go ahead and put those down in the description. So we got the stats out of the way, we got the enchants out of the way, we got everything else out of the way. I'm going to talk about some tips and tricks as a warrior. There's PvP talents and tricks with them that are actually going to save you a lot of headache in games. So you are queuing into a solo shuffle, you queue into a boomkin. That boomkin has to go every 45 seconds, I believe, if they interrupt and root, and every minute if they're able to do it. Now, most boomkins aren't able to interrupt and root at the same time because they're also getting hit. They're always the ones being trained, right? Well, we have a really useful talent. 2 useful talents that actually completely counter a boomkin's pressure in that go. And your healer just has to walk out of it. Master and Commander makes you extremely tanky, especially in D-stance, actually makes you kind of unkillable. So that's one benefit. And Battlefield Commander, if we look right here on Rallying Cry, removes movement and pairing effects and grants 30% movement speed to allies. So, what does that do for Fury? And it works for arms as well. And I believe Prot gets your healer out of that root. It breaks roots and gives you speed up. So, if your healer's in range, you can get out of. You can get them out of that root beam. And the only thing you ever have to worry about is clone. Unless you're stunned. And then you obviously can't get them out. But really, really strong. Stops a lot of pressure from the boomkin because your healer is able to trade their healing for their damage, right? Or cooldowns, because usually boomkins always follow up with big dam in Karn. Just something useful right there. Another situational thing, if you know you're not going to be you're not going to be the one training because you're playing with Warlock, and you're going to be playing Mountain Thane. There's no boomkin, there's nothing like that on the other team. You can run the 1 minute rally, it's something I like to do, and safeguard, especially if you're able to cleave and you're already able to do a lot of damage, so you're not going to be limiting yourself, and you have to peel for yourself with like a disarm or something like that. You can run safeguard, which actually save your team a lot of the time. I've had that 2 minute mark hit, and Safeguard is carrying the game, and we're able to just live through the pressure, even though our healer, the dampening, was hitting like 50% at that point. It's basically a game of hotcakes. Safeguard will save your team. Big Rally will save you, and you can run the big trinket here. This is something I like to do, especially in comps where I know I'm going to be trained into like double caster. 1.3 million health. Do that with a rally, you're able to get up to 11 million health. And you pair that with the Enrage Tree Gen, Bloodthirst, you're basically full health, right? Especially if you get the burst power, and then you're able to Bloodthirst 3 times, and then into a Blade Storm, you're basically full health, right? You basically stop an entire go, and if they double commit cooldowns on you, you're full health. Their cooldowns, usually most cooldowns don't last longer than, let's say, 12 seconds, right? So you stop so much pressure, you don't die. I have not had a game where I've run that trinket, short rally, and everything else, and I'm able to get that burst of power, or even, a Blade Storm and a Bloodthirst off with an impending victory. Like, I'm unkillable for those 11 seconds. 10 or 11 seconds, however long Enrage Regen lasts, right? So that's one useful thing. Disarm has its situations, but I feel like, especially in solo shuffle, people are going to overlap with their cooldowns. Even though you can Safeguard intervene into someone, it's still, I believe it's stacked, so that's just, and you're just redirecting damage to yourself anyway, so that's always useful. And with Mountain Thane, you are giving them a little shield. I don't really think it does anything in PvP, so that's whatever. But those are pretty much all the only talents you're really going to run as far as utility. You can run Disarm, like into another Fury Warrior, which is really useful. It just stops your Mortal Strike. Usually you want to follow up with like a stun first, because most Fury Warriors are going to try to trinket automatically and get into a Blade Storm, and you can disarm it, and then they're sitting there with no pressure. And then they either, if they have a Pally on their team, they have to bop, and then usually you're getting a trinket, a bop, and all their cooldowns. And you've slowed down a ton of damage at this point, right? So, and their burst isn't going to last as long. So that's really useful. There's two, Battle Trance is good. Can be good if you're getting trained. I like to run this into Shadow Priest and Locks. Either or, depending on what the second DPS is. If it's a Hunter, Battle Trance is really good. If I'm going to be the one getting trained, I permaset D-Stance. I do a pile of damage in D-Stance still. And Mountain Thane just reduces the damage you take with stand on your feet, or keep your feet on the ground. It just reduces damage by 8%, lasts for 5 seconds. While you're cleaving this Mountain Thane, if they're training you and you're cleaving pets and whatever else, your attacks have a chance to grant you, is it like lightning strikes or whatever? They give you that give you Thunder Blast or whatever it's called. And there you go. Thunder Blast equals more Bloodthirst damage. More Bloodthirst damage equals more damage, right? So, and more healing, more sustain. So that's another situation where it's really good. So that's how I like to think of it. Either being completely unkillable, mitigating a go every, at that beginning of the game, preventing my death, which completely mitigates a go. And a lot of time with running the double trinket, or the big health trinket and the rally, usually that's enough, because it's kind of hard to kill someone with 11 million health and they're taking 30% less damage. Another thing to kind of think about. Warriors are actually really tanky. Slayer's definitely a lot more squishy in some regards, but a little bit tankier into like more padding, kind of like dots. It's kind of weird, because if you're getting procs as Slayer, you're getting that health back with, I think, what is it called, like Death Drive or whatever. It kind of just adds into your overall healing profile, which fits really well, just because you get a proc, you're already bloodthirsting. If you have Battle Trance, you're doing a ton of healing throughout the game. Not as much as you would like other DPS, but the thing is, with Fury, you're maintaining a certain amount of healing, like damage and going out. So Fury is kind of like the sustain of that healing. let's say, is 150k HBS, right? We have a ton of healing throughout the game. I'm really tanky with defensive stance now. It's probably the only reason Warriors is as strong as it is now. When it comes to Dragon Roar, definitely a lot weaker in the way of just doing pressure. It has really good damage, but the problem is it kind of falls flat on its face. I feel like just having the extra 20% attack speed to your weapons and that 2% extra haste, it's always going to outpace Dragon Roar just because of it. You're always going to have auto attacks, especially as Fury, that are going to be able to crit because you always have recklessness. So it's just kind of like one of those things. You just get more attack speed. Well, guess what? Attack speed equals more rage equals more rampages, more rage equals more uptime on recklessness and avatar. It's another interesting way to think about it, right? So that's definitely one way I like to think about it. Slayer, all the way mastery. You get a lot of haste from the tree. But as far as PB talents, we covered enchants, gearing, everything else. Feels really good. And I hope you guys like the guide. This is probably one of the only guides that I've seen so far where you can run both and still get 2400 and succeed on your Fury Warrior this season. I'm going to come out with a few other classes as well on how to hit 2400 in solo. So go ahead and stay tuned, subscribe, like, and do whatever you're going to do, and you all have a good one. See ya.